thank you for joining us today for our panel of what engineering leaders should be measuring. This is a lead dev webinar, also brought to you by with a partnership with Code Climate. We will be here about 45 minutes after we'll hear both myself and especially the panelists. The panelists will join everyone over at the Effective Teams channel in the lead dev Slack. We'll also have a few minutes to answer questions live. So there's a Q&A box somewhere around here in YouTube style. Just send your questions and we'll sort through them and hopefully get them answered towards the end. But let's get started, and we'll start with some introductions. I'm the host. My name is Juan Pablo Buritica. I'm an engineering leader, and today I'm really excited to be nerding out on one of my favorite topics with Kat, Dahlia, and Jimmy about engineering metrics. So rather than going around introducing everyone, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. Let's start with Dahlia. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Dahlia Havens, and I'm the VP of Engineering at Replicated. Before this role, I was the VP of Engineering at Netlify, and before that, a Director of Engineering at GitLab. Maybe I'll pass it on to Kat.
Hello, everybody. I am Kat Swattel. I'm floating through life aimlessly. I've been an engineering leader for a while, and I specifically like working on products and services that either shouldn't exist anymore or shouldn't exist yet. That's kind of what I'm up to. Jimmy?
Thank you, Kat. My name is Jimmy McGill. As you may be able to tell, formerly from Australia, but now in New York City, where I serve as the VP of Engineering for the Code Climate engineering team.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So to dive straight in to our topic of the day, I'm interested a little bit on y'all's experience with metrics, how you've used them in your organization, what have you learned briefly, and we can probably try going in reverse order this time around. So Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons I'm now working with the engineering team at Code Climate is because this has been something that has been really important to me as an engineering leader, as someone who in the past has been managing ICs, managing first-time managers who are trying to themselves learn how to be effective managers and build effective teams. And one of the things I learned very early on in my career is that I am very far from perfect and will always have blind spots that I don't realize exist. And those blind spots are likely to amplify my biases. They may lead to missing elements of friction within the team. And as an engineering leader, I see it as my job to at least be aware of all of those things. And it's impossible to do that without having access to data and metrics as just a layer of facts, on top of which I view it as my job as a manager and an engineering leader to interpret those facts in the context of what I know about the people I'm working with, what I know about the particular business and the stage we're at. But it's the foundation on top of which, in my opinion, everything else sits. And if you try and substitute or fill in those gaps, there is a risk that you will miss something as a leader that will create either negative experiences for the people on your team, which is what I'm trying to avoid above all else, or best case scenario, just lead to inefficiencies and frictions that slow down your team's ability to deliver meaningful impact.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kat.
Yeah, I guess the reason that I care about metrics is because I think we have this issue in knowledge work where many knowledge workers are wronged in their capacity as knowers. So I guess what I'm really interested in is how can we use metrics to validate the lived experience of knowledge workers rather than saying to them, like, of course, this schedule is possible. How do I know? Because I made up this spreadsheet, right? So that's kind of what I'm interested in. Dahlia?
Thank you, Kat. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what Kat and Jimmy have talked about here when it comes to metric. I fell in love with metrics because they allowed for a healthier focus on the problem. It wasn't about a gut feel. It was, when it's not punitive, when used correctly, it is a tool to be able to debug what's getting in the team's way. And I think the balance of the data with the human element of we are responsible for teams of people. And I think I may share this formula with a few other leaders in our field. At the end of the day, people do their best work when they are supported, when there's a safe environment for them to explore the problems ahead of them and be enabled to solve them. So that's what I've been able to leverage some of these engineering metrics for. They're not always perfect, but I think the more I've worked with them, the more they became more tailored to the problems that the team was facing. So just like observability in our environment, it gets better as you use it. You define your alerts better and so on and so forth. Similarly for these engineering metrics, I've found them to be super valuable to a lot of the conversation and challenges we were facing. So I've been fortunate enough to work with metrics on three separate engineering organizations, which has allowed me to sort of field some of the baselines that I've started to bring on as part of my toolkit, to also learn that data integrity is an important part of validating before you make a judgment based on this data. So oftentimes it's actually debugging through that metric, you find out that there's outliers or things that you should take into account that really help foster that conversation. And people walk away with more ideas on how they can use the metrics to help them debug things.
I'd love to just build on a small point that Dahlia made there, because it really resonated with me, which is the data can help us to identify and debug where there are problems or challenges within an organization. It can also help us to understand whether what we're doing is making things better, and help both as a way of keeping ourselves honest, but also as a means of communicating and demonstrating to our team that improvement is happening, and allowing them to hold us as engineering leaders accountable to driving and measuring that improvement.
So I agree with everything that everyone said. I'll say that in my experience, discovering metrics, discovering that there are some things that we can measure in teams, when you go from the stage where you know what absolutely everyone is doing to you don't anymore, right? You're 10 and you talk every day, and suddenly you're 40. You have no idea what's going on, why the system seems to be slow, how you can drive change or move forward is one of the sort of best things that happened to me as far as encountering these metrics and deploying them and learning about them. So really excited to learn about all of your experience. Kat, what do you think are good reasons to use metrics in an engineering organization?
I think there's probably two reasons. Number one, you have a problem. That seems like generally a good thing, rather than just like mandating we use this dashboard now or whatever the case may be. But if there's a legitimate problem that you need to investigate. And then I think the other one is maybe like a little bit squishier perhaps, but I like to use metrics and investigate when people keep telling me they have a feeling or they have an intuition, or, well, I thought I better stay close to the phone, or like, I thought I better like plan to bring my lunch that day, or even little things like that, where you could tell that experts are having some sort of intuition about the system, like it's about to tip into some sort of behavior that's not as safe. That usually for me is another good indication that we should start getting curious about the trends in our metrics.
Thank you. Jimmy, is there anything you got there?
There's two things I'd add. So I absolutely agree that when you start to hear from the team and get a sense that there's a problem, going to the metrics and understanding where has your baseline shifted, where are you seeing patterns that are atypical for your organization, which you as the engineering leader probably know best. It is a really great place to start, and again, to check and balance your intuition. I've also personally found that there is some value in monitoring a few key metrics on a continuous basis, and looking for abnormal patterns or exceptions. And some of my least proud moments as an engineering leader is when I am the last person to find out about a problem within the team, and it's already caused friction or pain. And some of my proudest moments are when I can get ahead of that and make sure that I'm coaching the folks on my team through the right skills and capabilities for them to get us back to a happy baseline.
Wonderful. So before I jumped into Dahlia, I wonder, Dahlia, also if you can start adding a little bit of what metrics are good to use or not, or which metrics have you used, because maybe we can start grounding it a little bit for our audience, since we've talked abstract metrics but not precise things, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of really great things that Kat and Jimmy touched on. I mean, we get a range of questions all the way to, can you get the team to work harder or deliver more? And why is the team so slow? And without metrics, it's really hard to come back to the data, to have these conversations in a more constructive way of, well, let's talk about what's getting ahead, in front of the team. What are the roadblocks? What are some of the things that we as an organization are responsible for improving, so that they can also go faster and deliver what you're looking for. I've also leveraged metrics to talk about in a way. Maybe some of the metrics and numbers we're going to talk about are about execution, about motion, but they're not about direction. And we as leaders need to be comfortable saying that we can move as fast as we can, but if we're pointing it in the wrong direction, it's likely that the team is not going to produce what's most valuable or impactful for the business. So aligning how we're constantly improving execution and sort of that clearing the motion so that the gears can turn as efficiently as possible, with the responsibility of prioritizing and focusing on true goals and really the impact and drivers for the company itself. Because ultimately, the success of the business is not how many PRs an engineer can ship every week, but more that you are building the right features for your users, or you are gaining whatever or achieving whatever goals you have. So that's definitely been super valuable to have some of these metrics. To get into some of the more specifics, I've found a lot of success starting with some very basic ones, simply, and I'm going to caveat it, these are not the end all be all. I encourage you all to pick up the book, Accelerate. It not only gives you insight into some of the key metrics, but also talks a lot about how to use them and how to improve them and make the team efficient. Talks about giving autonomy and a safe environment. So I won't spoil the entire book, but it's a really, really great recommendation, and I encourage you to take it. For me personally, I typically would start with a team, as I mentioned, with a few simple ones. I rely on most of the teams I've been with have, we're Git based, so it's easy to take that data and look at your throughput. Cycle time is another really good one to debug through, see why things are maybe staying longer. How many days or hours are those PRs taking to merge to production? So defining those metrics for you. I also encourage you to balance these quantity-based metrics with quality-based metrics. A high throughput where engineers are just introducing bugs and fixing them may give the appearance that you're shipping a lot, but you're actually in a really bad cycle. So by having quality metrics, you can keep an eye on that quality bar. Doing more is not always the goal. Having high quality, high efficiency, producing the right thing is a really nice balance. And then I also pair it with a soft metric. I very much approach these things with a human lens. So I do a weekly pulse survey with the team to get a gauge of how is the team feeling across three different areas to be able to also allow the data to bring conversations, especially when the numbers slump, coming to the team and saying, hey, I noticed that, you know, the responses were lower this week, or our numbers were lower. I am curious, how do we feel about some things, and how can we make that actionable? So a balanced dashboard, you're going to tailor it and learn a lot the more you use it. But starting with some of the simple ones, I've found a lot of success with.
Thank you. Kat, I know I started with you, this round of questions, but I'm curious if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I kind of have these 4 buckets, and I choose the metric from each of the buckets. Like if I have no idea what else is going on, I'm like, well, I probably won't mess things up too terribly by picking one of each. They're from the Software Development Performance Index. So the first one is responsiveness, which is basically like a customer asks for something, how quickly do we deliver it to them? Then there's productivity, which would be throughput, predictability. So if we say we think we're going to deliver this on this date, do we actually do that? Is there like a high degree of variability in our deliveries? And then quality, just like Dahlia said, right? And what I've found a lot is that there will be like some thing, some mandate or some OKR or some target or whatever that is some sort of do this, and then there's no balance, and people really over-index on that. I worked with an executive before who mandated cut the time and process or the cycle time by 50% for everything, and people just they did that, yes, but in some really creative ways. Like, okay, well, now we're going to take all of our existing work and like split it into multiple tickets, or we're going to stop counting weekends and holidays in our time and process or something like that. Like, so they did the thing that he asked for, but because there wasn't like a balance on that metric and there wasn't really a story about the metric, it did not at all have the desired effect, which was getting to market more quickly with some of these experimental products. So I definitely agree with Dahlia, go for a balance.
Jimmy,
I just want to
yeah,
add my strong support. Kat and Dahlia have both touched on what I think is one of the most important fundamentals of using metrics, which is you can't over-index on any one metric or any one category of metrics without it having unintended results. So it's a balancing act, and some of the most interesting insights I see emerge from the data I look at is not one number going up and one number going down, but the ratios between different metrics I'm measuring shifting over time that suggest how we're working is changing. And then it's up to me as a leader to interpret whether that change is positive or something that needs to be addressed. This means that it's really important to measure across a variety of different buckets, as Kat put it, and that means pulling in data from a variety of different tools. But if you only look at one bucket, you're going to be able to paint a story that isn't necessarily reflective of what's happening on the ground.
That's spot on. I think so. So metrics aren't the reason to work, right? We don't work because of throughput. We don't work, well, we would like quality in the work that we output, and that's why we measure it, but we don't want to discount quality and then probably ship too slow, or there's a balance in the end, right? And I think one of the most valuable things I learned when I was implementing metrics is that the outcomes that I was seeking mattered more than the metrics that I was measuring, right? And sometimes I think, especially in engineering, we obsess over measuring, like how are we going to measure and how do we get precisely this thing overall. And I learned, I know Dahlia plugged Accelerate, so I plug it here, I keep it right here by my desk. I learned that I can measure things with a survey, and that may be enough, right? Like Nicole and her team, Dr. Nicole, by the way, and her team taught us a lot about like through research how we can learn about from our organizations with very simple tools or complex tools as well once you start getting to a certain size. I love that Kat mentioned a couple of things that we're headed towards the direction, right? The nefarious results of metrics, and also so I'm going to combine two questions we have coming ahead. First of all, what are bad reasons to introduce metrics to an organization? And how do you prevent, or how have you prevented some of these poor metrics or good metrics from being misused or gamed or used against individuals? And this time around, I'm going to start with Dahlia.
Sure. So Kat put it perfectly. Oftentimes, the misuse of metrics comes from the leaders. What are you asking your team to do, and how are you leveraging metrics? If you use them as a tool to support your developers, it's not punitive, it is an insight into what we're going through, then you shift the focus to be a little bit more healthier, you create a safer environment. When I've seen metrics go wrong, it's when you said improve productivity, which sometimes equals increase throughput by 20%. Well, I mean, yeah, we're smart engineers. We can do that. So I get this question often about gaming the metrics. And here's the thing. The teams I've been on that focused heavily on gaming the metrics were the ones where the leaders were super focused on the raw numbers instead of the trend, instead of using them to be an ally to the team in solving the problem. But oftentimes when you do use them productively, when you focus on solving the problem, help your team excel, recognize their effort when they're working hard, but things are still not making it to production, then you get a really more cooperative environment and less focus on breaking things down in a way that is not useful for the team. Because at the end of the day, breaking things into a million PRs is overhead. And most engineers don't really want to take on that overhead. They would much rather focus on delivering a product to production and be proud of their work. So I think, I really cannot stress this. We as leaders are responsible for how well you can leverage metrics and the health of your organization when you have data like that. I personally feel like I can't turn back. I can't manage a team without metrics. I equate it to flying without gears, completely blind. I don't know which side is up, and you're over the ocean, so everything is blue. You need some type of signal of how things are going so that you can productively get where you need to go.
Great, thank you. Jimmy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, my broad theme, just to build on what Dahlia has already said, is metrics cannot be a substitute for people management and for coaching. And if you as a leader decide, okay, the way you get promoted is by hitting these particular KPIs, you are putting in place the incentive system that leads to those metrics being valuable to game. In the organizations I've worked with, there's been no value in gaming the metrics because they're metrics that we talk about openly. Everybody is aware of what we're tracking. Everybody has access to that data. And there's a shared understanding that we're using that to improve the way we operate in a way that should make it even more fun to do what is already fun, which is to come in and be an engineer. Every engineer has had that time in their life where they have either been on the receiving end of a really slow code review, or they've been the person causing a really slow code review. And I think in both cases, my experience is that people say, both of these are bad and I don't want them to happen. And I want visibility when they're happening. So as a team, we can work out how to get in front of that. And through that lens, gaming the metrics really just introduces noise that makes it harder to operate effectively as a team. So in my experience, it hasn't been a challenge. And I think the key to getting there is simply being open and honest and having discussions as a team about why we're collecting these metrics, how they're going to be used, importantly, how they're not going to be used, and making sure that all of that happens before anybody has seen a dashboard pop up in front of their screen.
Thank you. Kat, Any thoughts, since you kind of led us a little bit in this direction?
Yes, this is like my favorite topic. Yeah, I think so. I'm paying attention. Okay. We just talked about some abstract things. I'll talk about something concrete. When I introduce metrics, or specifically like a dashboard or something for leaders, or that leaders will be consuming, my motto is always provide the minimum amount of information in order to make that valuable and actionable. So a lot of times what I will do is remove all of the numbers, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but I remove all of the numbers from whatever graph or chart, so that you can only discern the trend, right? Like, how is this metric moving? But you can't tell, like, oh, well, team B is 11 and team C is 47. Like, you can only see everyone is trending in a bad direction, or everyone is trending in a good direction, or this little pocket over here is doing something completely different than everyone else. Let's get curious about that. So I remove as much information as possible, which sometimes people are like, then it's not real. Very much is, I promise you. Then the other thing that I always make sure to do is show the absence of information. So if there are teams that don't have the metric or whatever else, like there's some gap somewhere, I always make sure to make sure that that's part of the story that we're telling, right? Because we never want people to be punished for being like the early adopters of the metric, right? And it's like, oh, everyone's trending in a bad direction. And then you zero in on those teams that did the good thing of coming forward with the data. And then the kind of laggards are like, whoa, no thanks, right? So displaying the lack of information is something that's been helpful for me in keeping these things from kind of being weaponized against the teams. And then I would say just use common sense, like use common sense. One of my favorite things that's ever happened to me is, there were some super well-meaning people that were trying to like check a box on behalf of their teams. Like they're trying to protect their teams, right? From like, oh, you didn't meet your goal or whatever. So this person took all of their data about their cycle time or their time in process and decided that instead of doing like a probability-based confidence on there, like, 90% of the time we deliver in X days or less, she decided to use standard deviations because that made the team look like they were. However, if you went by those standard deviations, it said that like 17% of the time they would go back in time and deliver the thing back in time. And like, it took actually a long time for people to be like, wait a second, these standard deviations are perhaps telling a story that is impossible given our current level of understanding about relativity. So like just being a little bit skeptical and like, hey, this one looks a little different or whatever, right? And using common sense, I think like that's feedback for the leader in that situation, right? Like, how did I end up putting this person in this situation where she feels like she needs to use this funny math in order to protect her teams? Like, I need to take a moment and look in the mirror and ask why I'm like asking this poor person to invent a time machine. So those are kind of my big things, I guess, that are pretty tactical.
No, that's very useful. Something that I found is software from people who come from outside of software seems very unintuitive, right? So we try to find like, look, if I can target sales this way, then why can't you give me something similar? And that's how we land with metrics that aren't necessarily useful, like lines of code, right? And sort of trying to find and analogous ways for other teams that people seem to have a little bit more experience on takes us down the wrong path, right? A poor reason of why to measure an engineering team is because you want to compare it to another unit of the organization. I also found that one of the reasons, or one of the ways of not getting people to game metrics or to want to game them, is not tying these to specific individual performance, right? Throughput or cycle time are an indicator of, it's an emergent property, right? It's like the heartbeat of the heart. I don't go in and look at the little heart cell and see like, oh, well, how is your heartbeat today? It makes no sense. But if we try to use these, or it's when we try to use these collective metrics to measure individuals and check their performance and maybe see if they're doing well or not, and start making organizational decisions, it's when we start encouraging folks to game them, right? It's like, all right, let's talk about your velocity. You did 700 points. Why didn't you do 1,000? Okay, well, now my story is 1,000. We made 20,000 points this time. Wonderful. So let's keep getting into more and more specifics. I'm curious now from y'all to hear about one or two metrics you've measured with one of your teams, how you introduced this metric to your team, how you measured, who had access to it, did you report, like what was the process and what you learned along the way. This time around, Jimmy gets to go first.
Yeah. So building on the heartbeat, I, as an engineer on a team, you don't want to be fighting against the cadence of the team. You want to be swept up in it. It should provide a natural rhythm that assists you in doing your work, and importantly, assists you in breaking down larger problems and tackling them a little piece at a time. And it should feel natural. So what are some of the things that can push against that? One of the obvious ones that I'm aware of is if your issue cycle time or your pull request cycle time start to increase, it incentivizes, okay, each issue is going to have some amount of tax associated with it. I don't want to deal with that tax within the team because the team isn't flowing smoothly. So I want to just do one giant issue and one giant pull request. And paradoxically, that makes everything worse because I, as an engineer, open the giant pull request, have a mini heart attack, go walk around the block a few times before I try and dive in and resolve it. So the first two metrics I introduced to my team in a previous role when I was trying to establish that cadence was pull request cycle time and issue cycle time. And I did that to the best of my ability in collaboration with the team. So worked with them through a brainstorming exercise to ensure that they felt that those were useful metrics. We ran an exercise that we called a pre-mortem. How could these metrics lead us astray? If we got taken off the rails by this, what would we be looking back in hindsight and saying we wish we'd done differently? And then by collecting and measuring that data, and I actually aggregated it at the organization level in this particular case because this was a systematic thing. It wasn't a particular sub-team, and put it on a dashboard. And we looked at it every day, and I have a hypothesis that alone helped drive some improvement. But importantly, we also checked in on it as part of each retrospective that we held, and made sure that we were holding ourselves accountable to generating ideas to improve it, measuring or reflecting on whether the things we had done last cycle had helped, or deciding that it was at a place we were happy with, and then not obsessing with it going forward.
Sorry, I lost my mute. Thank you. Dahlia, how about you?
Yeah, I like Jimmy's cycle time for sure. This is one of the metrics that's really actually has helped, especially distributed teams when time zones are a factor, to look at what stages the PRs are getting stuck in or taking longer, and allow the team to come up with ways that they want to address it. I would definitely look into that. For me, the metric I typically would start with, again, or maybe I should say two, because I would be remiss if I only talk about the quantity metric, but I use throughput. This one is, for me, has been fairly straightforward to get the data for. Basically what I measure is the number of PRs that get merged to main on a weekly basis. And as Kat mentioned, I actually love your idea of removing the raw numbers, because it's actually the trend that matters. How consistently are we able to get things to production is what that metric can allow you to see. It's actually a really good negative metric. When things are not making it to main, that's when you want to check in and see what's getting in the team's way. So I've used this metric. Actually, we've seen it trend down, and had a conversation with the team, and it's been really useful to have it, because each engineer was trying to get their code over the line, but was running into our tests were flaky, but they all internalized that problem as, it's on my end, it's my problem. And it was because of the metric, and because these metrics are team-based, that it allowed us all to come together and say, oh, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's having trouble. Everyone on the team is struggling with this problem. So instead, we refocused the project to improve our tests and really trim down some of those flaky tests that were adding time and so on. So it really allowed the team to debug through this one. I like to break down throughput by categories. So one of the things that's been really useful is to see what percentage of the work is going toward new feature development versus bugs versus security issues versus tech debt. That breakdown alone can help you see, do you have a huge amount of tech debt that you need to address? And this is why feature development is taking longer, because you're not addressing the core thing that's slowing down the engineers. So the breakdown within throughput has been really useful for my teams to see that balance. And then, as I mentioned, and we'll probably keep mentioning, quality is important, so that you're not in a cycle of simply hyper focused on ship more. So I like to look at incidents in production by severity, just as a gauge for how well is the product holding in the wild. We're going to have bugs. This is software. Don't sweat it. But you do want to check in and see if a lot of high severity issues are in production. Give the team time to address them, so that they're not penalized constantly for having to ship more when things are not really, when the quality bar is suffering. So I'll pause here. I'm sure in the interest of time, I do want to give Kat and anyone else time to add.
Thank you, Dalia. We'll go with Kat, and we have plenty of really good questions. So while Kat answers this, Jimmy and Dalia, if you want to start looking at your favorite ones in the Q&A, and we'll just jump straight so we can answer as many as we can. But yeah, Kat, what specific metrics have you introduced, and how, and what'd you learn?
Okay, I feel like we've talked a lot about throughput and cycle time, so I won't say those. I will say one thing about cycle time. This is not the question, but I'm going to insert it here. I've done a lot of work with teams that are like instrumenting manufacturing lines, or embedded systems or something like that. And we in software development have a really different definition of cycle time than essentially the rest of the world. So if you're interfacing with teams that work in manufacturing, for them, cycle time is the amount of time that elapses between things coming off the line. So like for us, that would basically be like, I push this into production, it's in production, how much time elapses before the next successful deployment? So if you are working with teams in manufacturing or something like that, if you say the word cycle time, they might not understand or have a different understanding of what you're saying, which is why I keep saying cycle time or time in process, because sometimes, and we also use lead time in a different way than like the rest of the world generally. So it's a little bit confusing, but I'll throw that out there. I think the metric that I use a lot is piles of stuff, which is a very technical term, as you can tell. Basically, I look at how many units of work or units of value are in any given state at any time. And then how old are those? How long have they been there? So in our backlog, like in development with the team, if there's some like in betweenish phase where it's like going to production, but not in production, or it's in production, but it's not in use or something like that. Because then, and a lot of times, like I've worked in a lot of highly regulated industries, and there's some sort of sign off phase, like it has to go to a lawyer or it has to go to whatever, and they have to like put their eyeballs on it to make sure that it's an okay thing or whatever. I don't know. As you can tell, I'm not a lawyer. So I just keep track of how many things are in each state and how long have they been there. Because there is a relationship, like if a bunch of things are building up in a state, then on average, each one of those things will take longer. That's Little's law. So that's kind of like a, before things take longer, we can know that they're going to take longer because there's some big kind of pile of stuff at some point in our system or with some team or whatever the case may be. So that's my weird one that I'll throw out there for everyone. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much it.
Sweet. I think we have 4 minutes to go, so we're gonna do a round robin quickly, try to answer as many as we can. Jimmy, I imagine you've picked one of the questions from the Q&A, hopefully. Which one do you want to answer?
I will answer a theme of questions. A few folks have asked what tools exist, open source or not, what tools can we use to measure this, what are your favorite tools? I'll knock all of that off. I'm biased. I believe Code Climate is a very good tool for measuring this. It's what we wake up every day and ask, how can we help everybody do a great job? I will share one personal experience, which is in the past, I have tried to roll my own versions of these tools. And as Dahlia mentioned earlier, it is critically important that you have data integrity. And if you have, misleading outliers or even worse, missing data, it's very easy to lose your team's trust in these metrics, which mean they become less valuable for guiding interesting discussions and interesting decisions. So my own personal experience was rolling my own did not work well. Probably wasn't the best use of my time as a VPE, even though it was fun to code. So I now look elsewhere for folks who have built this out and focus on it.
Thank you. I'll add there. So I have used Code Climate. It's actually the first reason why I started giving talks. I think the first talk about metrics I gave at one of your events. But I will balance it a little bit, which is engineers over index on tools. And for some things that are really easy to measure, like cycle time, you should use tools, but sometimes a survey may be enough. And don't obsess over the measuring or the tooling and trying to go like too deep because we may waste more time there than actually like driving our teams. Personal experience. I built custom dashboards too. Dahlia, which question do you want to tackle?
I answered a few, but I think like the category I was looking at is sort of the specifics of some of the metrics I mentioned. So just to add a little bit, typically, as I kind of touched on this, but I'll say it a little deeper. I look at like our Git data is very accessible. So that's a really good way to start looking at what data can you pull from. Jimmy said it perfectly. Sometimes you may want to go and leverage a tool to just accelerate building those dashboards and getting a feel for what works with your team. But typically what I've found is, start small at the PR level. I've found that looking at the lowest common denominator actually created less distraction. I don't like to get in the team's way of how they like to work. So when we started to up level to issues, it became, and I think Jimmy, you touched on this, the focus was, we need to break down issues to everything in its own. And while to some extent that was useful in scoping things down, and actually the team found it valuable to, work iteratively in that model, they weren't necessarily the best methods for every team. So the PR and that lower denominator allowed me to get some measures that can be a little bit more independent of how each team wants to operate. So I encourage you as leaders to give autonomy to the team. Every team is going to work a little differently. Metrics are not going to be comparable between teams. Please do not try to. In hyper growth, I will say, because I feel really fortunate to have been with teams that are growing. One of the things that we don't think about as leaders is that interviewing, hiring, and growing a team, onboarding new developers will actually bring your throughput down. So with the question of why is our throughput going down when we're adding more engineers is a good one to ask, because what you'll find is your developers are still very productive, but they are enabling others to come in and onboard and really be able to be effective. But the more you hire, the more you are asking of them to pay attention to other responsibilities besides just shipping product. Hopefully that helps.
And I think we're at time. We're actually a minute over. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. I think we're going to jump into the Slack channel, try to answer some of these. We could talk about this for a full day, I'm sure. Thank you, Lead Dev and CodeClimate for having us, and see you in the Slack.